Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Mysterious Worlds Talk Show. I'm your host, Paul Rook, and as you know, we have a guest tonight. Guest has been normal for quite a while, and he mainly started with Most Haunted. So I just want to, it's Mike Covell. Okay, I'll try again. Bring him in. There you go. Hello, Mike.
You all right?
Yeah, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Good. So let's first go into a little bit about yourself. How did you get into the paranormal? Was you interested in it when you're small, or?
Yeah, when I was 8, I was in bed one night, living on this same street that I'm on now, and the bedroom was just
Yeah.
bathed in light, and I looked out the window and I saw a big egg, and that's the only way I can describe it. It was just like a floating egg, and I wasn't scared. I was quite calm. And initially, I thought there was like
Hmm.
burglars in the street and they were shining torches through people's windows. But I wasn't scared or worried or anything like that. And I remember just this feeling of great calm. And I went and got in bed and just ignored it. And then the next
Yeah.
morning, I went down for breakfast, and my dad was sat at the breakfast table. And he'd always say to me, "Oh, did you have a good night's sleep?" And I said, "Oh, I saw this really weird thing last night out the window." And I told him what it was. And he just said to me, "Just stay there."
Yeah.
And he ran upstairs, came back down with a big copy of it was a Partworks magazine that would collect into a folder called The Unexplained, and it was really popular in the late 70s and early 80s. And he practically threw the first volume at
Yeah.
me and said, "Read that." And I read it front to back, and it was all it covered things like unsolved mysteries, true crime, things like sea monsters, lake monsters, big black cats, biblical
Yeah.
mysteries, you name it. There was a flowchart about UFOs and stuff, and I started reading through that and got really excited then because there was this. I'd never heard of these things before, and it was the thought that
Yeah.
perhaps this could have been from out there, but it was the way my dad handled it as well. He never said to me it's a UFO. He said to me, "Go and read yourself and see what you think." And that was it. I was hooked. And
Hmm.
every year for Christmas, I'd ask for UFO books or books on ghosts and stuff like that. I would ask for videos that featured paranormal footage. I would ask for DVDs, all sorts. I had a subscription to several magazines, and throughout the
Hmm.
years, I continued to collect. And then life kind of takes over, and I ended up with a full time job and a mortgage and this kind of stuff. And a week after my daughter was born, 16 years ago, I was diagnosed with a critical heart condition, and I was told to give up my job. And the GP at
Hmm.
the time said, "Find a hobby, find something to occupy your mind." So I went back into that sort of area, and there was a couple of things I wanted to look at. One of them was local history, one of them was Jack the Ripper, and one of them was the paranormal. And I started looking at these things, and eventually I gathered together enough information to write a book. And then one became two, two became four, four became eight, and 32 books later,
Yeah.
and we're still going.
Are they what sort of books are they?
They cover everything really, from the paranormal to UFOs to ghosts and stuff. They're quite big, beefy
Okay.
volumes, and
Yeah.
they cover sightings and stuff. There's books there on things like the Hummer Monster, cryptozoology. I'm really big on history, so there's a lot on sort of the paranormal history of the area. I went back through the archives and found
Yeah.
Victorian stories, haunted houses, and stuff like that. There's a collection, a true crime collection that I've written. There's also a Jack the Ripper collection as well that I've written.
Yeah. Okay. How did you get into the whole Jack the Ripper subject?
So that was like another chapter in the book. There was a chapter on unsolved murders, and that led me on to Jack the Ripper. And the story that was presented at the time in the book
Hmm.
was that it was a black magician, and it just so happened that this guy lived in Hull. So that was it really. And I kind of grew up speaking to my dad
Yeah.
about Jack. We'd have these conversations. Who do you think Jack is? And we'd just have these conversations over tea, and it was just a normal family thing, you know. And that was it, really.
Yeah.
I just kind of grew from there. The interest in Jack.
Okay. Jack the Ripper. The Ripper was. Can you hear me?
That just totally cut out then, Paul. I didn't get that question at all.
Okay. No worries. Who do you think Jack the Ripper was?
I don't have a particular favourite suspect. There's been so many. There's been over 300 suspects that have been put forward. When I came into it, my idea was to look at those with associations to my home city and to look at the sort of genealogy and why they're suspects and who named them as suspects and things like that.
Okay. So after when you grew up, how did you set up your own paranormal team, or what happened?
So initially, I joined the Hull UFO Society, which is where I met Chris Evers from Outer Limits magazine, and Chris and I became firm friends. And we did a lot of work together back then, and then kind of expanded from there really, and started going off on my own, and college work took over, normal work took over, and I just kind of didn't have time for groups or activities. So it just became sort of a personal hobby. I'd go out on a weekend and I'd go, you know, to places that had UFO activity, paranormal activity, stories of big black cats, and I'd just go and see what I could find. And then eventually I found like-minded people on the internet that were operating in the area. So I would meet up with various teams. And obviously coming from an historical side, a lot of teams never used an historian. So they'd go to these venues and say, you know, we don't know much about the history. And they would get activity, but they wouldn't know what it was attributed to or why. So as an historian, I would go and I would say, you know, well, there have been deaths or suicides linked to the property and stuff like that. And I ended up getting introduced into numerous paranormal groups. So that kind of grew from there, really. I worked all over, travelled all over, as high up as Scotland, right around Yorkshire and stuff like that. And my sort of area of expertise is I would look at these haunted properties and I would go to the archives and research the history. So I would get the people that lived in there, the people that died in there, all these different stories and stuff. And that became like a valuable commodity to groups that never had that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I must admit, from a paranormal investigator's point of view, I've always looked in. I mean, a lot of people that claim they're historians for their teams just literally do a quick Facebook or Google search on the history of places, but it's so much more involved than that, isn't it?
Yeah, I discovered that a lot. I discovered that there was a lot of kind of hearsay where you would get one group would claim, you know, this area is haunted by monks. Then the next group would say the same thing, and the next group, and this would continue and continue. And the same with venues, you'd get maybe a psychic going and just make up these claims without any evidence whatsoever. But then it became accepted, and the next group that went in would use that to promote their event. And then I would go along and say, well, actually, the history is quite different to that, you know, and so that is a big problem. I've seen that a lot in the paranormal, where it's the regurgitation of the same old stories, and that happens so much.
Absolutely. I mean, there was on one of the other social media outlets, some American person claimed, I think it was London Bridge. It was destroyed and made way for another, like a second London Bridge. And I was like, well, actually, that's a bit wrong. You know, London Bridge was bought by an American. It's out somewhere in America still. Yeah. So there is a lot of misinformation when it comes to history out there.
Yeah, definitely, and especially with the
Especially,
paranormal, because like I say, you had people going in and making stuff up, and one of the most popular things when I first came into the field was we've tried to research it, but we can't find anything. And I'd say to them, well, have you gone to the local studies or have you gone to the archives? And they'd say, well, what do you mean? And I'd say, well, surely if you're researching a property, that would be where you start.
yeah,
Just don't use Google because Google is it's a modern thing. Go back in time. That's where you need to be. So I'd spent a lot of time going back through all
yeah.
these old archives, and it's lonely and it can be boring. But when you find stuff, when you get that eureka moment, it's amazing. It's a great feeling.
Hmm. Oh, absolutely. I mean, I would literally go to the library. That'd be my first. Well, Google will be my first point of call to the library, find a little bit more, go into archives, national records, and stuff like that. That's sort of where I would go. But I did find on Google, there's Google Academic or Academia, something like it's called,
Yeah.
and that gives you quite extensive research that the academics have put out there. Um,
Yes.
and I found that quite fascinating. I, I love just scrolling through that, just learning new stuff. It's brilliant.
Yeah. Definitely. I love the old newspaper sites. I can spend hours and hours on
So,
the old newspapers.
oh yeah, absolutely. No, that's good. Okay, so we've obviously got your story from right at the beginning. So you progressed into your paranormal team, and then you've gone out and about. How did you get involved with Most Haunted?
Yvette and Carl had actually come to Hull, and I run a business that specialises in tours, and we
Yeah,
do among the many tours we do a lot of ghost tours, and they came along and they came on a tour, and I took them around the venue and told them the history and stories of the paranormal, and they absolutely loved it. And then they sort of said to me, "How do you feel about coming on the show?" And I mean, I jumped at the chance. I grew up watching Most Haunted on TV, many moons ago,
hmm,
and I just wanted to see how it worked as well. I was curious to see what goes on behind the camera. So I agreed to it, and then I didn't hear
yeah,
anything for months and months. And then I got a contract for the post, like a non-disclosure. You can't talk about it until it airs, which is fair enough.
yeah,
And they came down and had a wonderful night, and we filmed together. And what was interesting for me is behind the scenes is how much they gel as a family. You don't really see that on the TV, but when they're off
yeah,
screen, they all really look after each other. They talk about each other's families and stuff like that, and that was really nice. It was a week before Christmas, so it was the last show that they filmed before Christmas. So they took that opportunity to have a
mm,
big buffet. So there was just piles of food all over the place. So everyone was just sat
yeah,
eating. And they wanted in the middle of the night they wanted a curry because it was so cold. And the only place that was open was a local um, takeaway, which doesn't have the best reputation for food hygiene. So I sort of said to him, I can get you a curry, but I can't promise you it'll be
yeah,
very nice. Anyway, they were fine. We ordered the curry. Everyone had curry. So it was just really chilled out. It was a really nice, relaxed atmosphere. It was quite festive. Um, they filmed for hours and hours and hours. I mean, I know when you see these shows on TV, you see like what 45 minutes to an hour. They were in there like eight,
yeah,
9, 10 hours filming. I think it took maybe 2 or 3 hours just to set the cameras up. They had quite a few locked off cameras. There was a lot of electrical cable running all over the place because it was an old building with not a lot of electrical cables and stuff in it. So there was a lot that goes into it that you just
mm,
don't see on the TV, and that kind of blew me away. That sort of aspect. So that was really nice. And
yeah,
we finished filming. I did a few. They have like the Most Haunted experience where they do like paranormal events and stuff. I
yeah,
appeared at a couple of them. And what had happened was when they filmed in Hull, they brought with them a Ouija board, and on the back of the Ouija board, it was signed by a number of quite celebrities, the cast and crew of the show, musicians from various bands, and it had all these autographs on it. And I looked after it. They left it in Hull, so I took care of this while they were gone. And when they came back to do the experience, I got this out for them and said, "I've got your Ouija board here." And I think Carl was just blown away by the fact that I'd kept this and looked after it and not stuck it on eBay or put it in my own personal collection. And he was really pleased that I was really honest. And that was it. We hit it off. We became really good friends. And then he sort of called me up out of the blue and said, "Do you want to come back and do Most Haunted Live?" And I just thought, yeah, that sounds amazing, you know. And again, totally sworn to secrecy. I had a driver whose job it was to take me there, and he didn't know where we were going until we literally set off on the road. You know, I basically gave him the postcode and said, "This is where we've got to go tonight." So we went, and social media didn't know I was doing it. So as you can imagine, when the show comes on and my name's in the credits, my social media just blew up. And I mean, I was in Pontefract in a street, you know, over Halloween, so it just went crazy. And the show went out live over Halloween in 2015. And then that led to a phone call from producers to appear on Paranormal Lockdown with Nick Groff and Katrina Weidman. And I didn't know I was working with them. Sometimes when you get a call from a producer, they'll just say, "Do you want to come and work on this show?" and this, that, and the other. So I primarily dealt with a lady in America, producer for the show, and she didn't say what show it was on. So I didn't have a clue. All I knew was they were sending a car to pick me up in my house and take me out to Pontefract. That's all I knew. And then when I got there, and I remember walking up it was filmed in an old cemetery, and the church had been blown away during the English Civil War. And I walked up the path towards the church, and Nick Groff was stood there. And he turned around and walked up to me, and I kept thinking, "Is that Nick Groff? Like, surely that can't be Nick Groff. Why's Nick Groff here?" What, you know? And I remember I said to him at the end of the film, I think we did it. We got our scenes done in about an hour and a half, 2 hours. We filmed it all in. There was a lot of kind of giggling and joking and laughing. It was quite light-hearted. It was a nice mood. And I remember at the end of it saying to him, "Can I get a picture? Because my kids will not believe me, you know, that I've been working with Nick Groff." And he was like, "Yeah, sure." And they were both lovely. I remember both Nick and Katrina were really interested in Jack the Ripper. We spoke a lot about Jack the Ripper, and the show had nothing to do with Jack. It was just something that they were interested in. But Nick had done a lot of research, so he knew about other cases that I'd worked on. He knew about various things I'd reported on in newspapers and stuff like that. So Nick was lovely. I mean, he was such a nice guy. And it was just funny. They were both really funny. I remember that the first shot we did, I was stood in the cemetery, and Nick had to basically walk up to me and say, you know, "How are you?" Or "Nice to meet you." And I had to say, "Oh, it's a pleasure to meet you." And he walked up to me and he said, "Do you often spend your weekends stood around in cemeteries on your own?" And that was it. Everyone started laughing, and the director was shouting abuse at us, you know, "Stop it, it's serious." And that was it. Once you've got the giggles, it's hard to get rid. It was a really nice show to work on, and it was so fun. Given the kind of stuff we cover, the kind of topics we cover, it was nice just to have a laugh.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. It does sound fun. So what activity did you get while you was there?
Well, it's really funny.
I didn't seen the show.
I never shot my scenes in East Drive. I shot my scenes in All Saints Church in Pontefract, some distance away.
Yeah.
So, and the idea was that they would come to me rather than me go to them. And it was really funny because the church is, if you can imagine a church with the roof blown off. So you've got the exterior walls, but you can walk through the church and there's no ceiling. And I remember we were stood in the middle of the church chatting away, and just a group of crows came into the church and just started flying around in circles above our head. But there were, you know, when you can hear them like crowing really, really loudly. And I remember the crew just ducked, and it was at that moment. That was when I And I think Nick had said, "What do you think of the Black Monk?" And at that, these bears just appeared and started flying around our heads, and we were just stood there like, "What?" And then it never even made it into the final cut. And I was like, "That is awesome," because that, I mean, it might be a total coincidence, but that kind of weird coincidence you can't fake, you can't, you know. So I mean, for me, that was really interesting to have that happen. You know, while we were stood in this
Yeah,
old abandoned chair.
that would have been interesting. Yeah, absolutely. No, so do you think then that a lot of shows are sort of not faked as such, but do you think they play up to the cameras?
I mean, when I went onto Most Haunted, people warned me, you know, beware, watch out, keep an eye out.
Hmm.
So when I went into filming, I was very observant. I was very cautious. I never saw anything while I was
Yeah,
with them that would suggest. There is, I think, a level of hysteria, but I think that's for TV.
yeah,
I do think when stuff happens, I think they play it up a little bit. Um, but yeah, I think I never saw anything that I would class as fraudulent while I was there. You know, and like I say, I
hmm,
kept my eyes on all the shows I do. I always keep an eye out to see what's going on. I've seen more fraudulent activity on
yeah,
paranormal events where customers have come and they've thrown bits of candle wax, or they've thrown screws across the room at people, or they've flicked coins and things like that. I've seen more of that on paranormal events with the public than I have working
yeah.
on any TV show.
Absolutely. I mean, I used to like before with the paranormal um, investigation side of things. I must use to what most haunted. I even going back as far as Ghost Watch, that it's like the 30th anniversary or something. This, um, and I've always had that interest, but I've always seen it on telly, never actually experienced it for myself until I've gone out doing the investigations myself. We've set obviously right at the beginning we didn't know much about what we was doing, so we was picking it up as going along and learning all the way, and it was just a group of friends to start off with. But yeah, it's watching these TV shows. You sit there and think, is it faked or is it genuine? We don't know. It could be more, especially with the TV. Um, so I had that uncertainty to go and experience it for myself.
Yeah,
Did it really happen? I mean, I've never had anything to they have on TV shows, but I've experienced quite a few explained. Are they paranormal? I don't know, but that's just half the fun of investigations.
yeah. Well, I always say to people, you know, until you've
Yeah,
gone on an investigation
that's why.
yourself and seen it or witnessed it, you know, it's because I've had some weird stuff happen
Mm,
over the years that I can't explain. And I've been fortunate enough to work with people that are there alongside me to witness it as well. But my favourite is when you get skeptics come along,
yeah.
when they experience stuff, you know. And I remember one guy came. We was doing an event at the Guildhall in Hull, and he was a skeptic, and he was only there because his girlfriend
Mm,
had shown up. He was sort of dragged along for hair
yeah.
protection. I remember him saying, "I don't believe in it. It's all rubbish." And there was a chair, and it was the Lord Mayor's chair where the Lord Mayor would sit during all the meetings and stuff. And this guy was sat in the chair,
Hmm.
and he was like, he just suddenly said, "I don't feel like I belong here." And I was like, "What do you mean? You know, if you don't believe in all this, why would you say something like that?" And all of a sudden, there was like a bang,
Yeah.
and his watch, which was a lovely, expensive watch, the screen just exploded, and there was glass everywhere. And he got up
Okay.
and said, "No," and he ran to the door, and over the spirit box, you heard the male just laughing, just like a male, like ha ha ha. And this kid just ran, and I remember that my first thought was, I need to get rid of the glass because if the Lord Mayor sits on that, is going to get injured. So I
Yeah.
remember everyone had run out of this room and left me trying to clear up the glass so that no one would get injured. And I remember going downstairs to him, and he
Yeah.
was sat having a cuppa, and he was shaking. And he said to me, "I can't explain that. Can you?" And I said, "No, I can't." I said, "But that's why we come and investigate." And he was terrified. And
Yeah.
I remember we finished the event at like 2 o'clock in the morning. I remember coming home, and after, whenever I've done a paranormal event, I can't just relax. I need to have a cuppa. I need to just unwind. I need to assimilate everything that's happened that night. So I remember being on Messenger, and all night he was messaging me, and it just totally changed his belief system. And I remember his girlfriend messaging me saying he just won't go to sleep. He just won't stop talking about it, you know. So, but yeah, I like it when stuff like that happens. You know, it's nice to have
Yeah.
stuff happen for people.
That's it. Yeah, it is quite amazing. I've done an event, and we was at Fort Amherst in Chatham, and we had skeptical brothers there, and I think it took us 10 minutes into the event before they were completely transformed into believers.
Yeah.
It does. It just blows your mind, doesn't it?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
On the flip side, I
Yeah.
remember working with a lady, and she turned up and she said to me, "Oh, I don't believe in any of this. I think it's all a money making scam." I said, "Fair enough." And after 10 minutes, I remember she came out of the building. She was crying. She was shaking. She wanted us to get her a taxi home. And I took her aside and said, "Just out of interest, what happened to you?" And she said, "I was in a room and I was stood by myself, and this shadow ran across the room from one side to the other." And so I said, "Let's go back and have a look." "Oh, no, I
Yeah.
don't want to go back." I said, "No, I'll come with you." So we went upstairs, and we were in this room together, and two shadows ran across the room. And I remember she grabbed my arm so tight and went to run, and I resisted and said, "Stay, just stay, please. Let's see what this is." And we
Yeah.
waited again, and two shadows ran across the room. And all it was vehicles were passing outside, and the car headlights were shining through the building, and their shadow had cast onto the wall. So when we'd both
Yeah.
gone up, both our shadows had cast. And when I explained that to her, that she was
Yeah.
so relieved. And I remember at the end of the night, she pulled me aside and said, "Thank you," because she said, "If I'd have gone home tonight, I would have been terrified of this place. But, you know, thanks for explaining it." And I said, "That's what it's all about. The
Yeah.
investigation side is we look at things like that, you know, not everything's paranormal. You know, we look for the normal before we look for the
Yeah.
paranormal." And she was really cool, and she came back for more. You know, she really enjoyed it.
Yeah. I went to Shrewsbury Prison, and I sat in one of the wings, looking all the way down to the other end, and I saw what I thought at the time was a shadow just popping his head out one of the cell doors, looking at me and then ducking back. I didn't say anything to anyone because what we used to do is just have various teams go into that area, and then at the end of the night have a debrief, so they don't talk to each other before that. And in this debrief, one team's they sat in the cell where I saw the shadow peeking out of, and they said they claimed that they saw it walking across the doorway, and then I think another team said that they saw the whole body jump out the doorway. But all three teams experienced the same shadow in the same area. Um, we couldn't explain that. You know, there's no way that there was lights or anything. You know, no cars or anything outside because it was sort of like the middle of the prison. So to this day, it just goes down on one of those unexplained occurrences. Was it a ghost? I don't know. We don't even know what a ghost is. So to say it's a ghost,
Yeah,
that's sort of the way I think
but
about it anyway.
all three, you know, and I like
Yeah.
it when multiple witnesses, you know, I think that's fantastic. I've done events where we've been in a room and, you know, people have seen shadows and people have seen figures crawling across the floor. And what we would do is we would all stand in different
Yeah.
corners, you know, maybe a group in one corner, a group. So you've got a full view of the room, and it's amazing afterwards to get everyone's feedback, and they'll say, well, we saw it come in, and then these people say, well, we saw it, and it's really interesting how all the eyewitness accounts matched up to seeing the shadow, and then the next week would do the same event in the same building, and then a new set of fresh eyewitnesses would come, and they'd experience the same thing, and they'd say, what is it? And I'd say, well, I don't know. I honestly don't know. But it's weird how week in, week out, different people would see this and report it back to us.
Did you ever record any of the strange occurrences that people have seen?
Well, I was the historian, so I wasn't the guy that was filming. But I worked with various groups, and they all took the camera equipment, so they all filmed and stuff like that. I was there basically I was sort of like the host, where groups would come and I would show them around, and then we'd go dark and we'd do the investigation. And then throughout the night, as they picked up on stuff, or if they got if they came up with names or things like that, I would confirm or deny, or I was basically there to give them the history at the end of the night, so they could see what we picked up on and stuff like that. So on several occasions, I was there as the guy that led the groups, basically. So I was never filming. But yeah, and I'm the type of person that runs around the building in the dark, looking for stuff. So giving me a camera would be a nightmare. But yeah, and I'm useless with technology as well. I've been on paranormal events where the technology
I'm pretty much the same.
Been a pain in the backside. I remember one event we had a parabolic mic, and we'd set it up in a building, and I had terrible wind, and I went off on my own, and I must have been about 50 or 60 rooms away from everyone, and I broke wind. And when I returned, everyone was sat laughing. I was like, "What are you all laughing for?" And I was like, "We heard it really loud on the parabolic mic," and it was just like technology.
That's it. There's no escape with technology. No. Everything's captured. That's funny. So what's your favourite era to research?
I love the Victorian period, but I'm also really keen on World War II. I spend a lot of time researching bunkers and stuff like that, visiting these sites. And I love the era. I've spent a lot of time. I worked on a couple of World War II TV shows and stuff like that. I just love the era. I love the whole secrecy side of it. I love how civilians came together to help the nation, and all the volunteers and the Home Guard and all that kind of stuff. I just found it fascinating. And then going back into the Victorian period, I just like the era. I like the fashions. I like the politics. I just love the Victorian period.
Yeah. Have you been down to the Ragged School?
I've not actually, no.
Okay, that's quite an interesting building. I've investigated it quite a few times. Never really had much activity going on, but just the building itself, it was like it used to be like a warehouse where they store the coal and wheat and stuff off the barge boats. But Dr. Bernardo took it over and used it as a children's orphanage type school.
Yeah.
So that's quite an interesting building. Yeah, that's one of my favourites.
Yeah, I've researched a couple of Victorian schools and places like that up north, up this end. Yeah, I've been to quite a few Victorian venues and stuff like that. I remember we did an investigation in one old Victorian school, and it was quiet. There was no activity, and I remember we all just piled into one schoolroom, and we were sat in this schoolroom just debating like, what now? What should we do? Because it's dead, it's quiet, and there was just a big bang on the door, like a headmaster was banging on the door, and I remember running and opening the door and looking down the corridor, and there was no one. And I remember closing the door, and it happened a couple of times. I think 3 or 4 times that night we had this big bang. Couldn't explain it. The corridor was empty. just baffled. And yeah, it was really weird because we looked for drafts and wind blowing and all that kind of stuff, and there was nothing that would suggest that it was anything natural. Um, but yeah, that was interesting. It was
Yeah.
almost like we were being told off for being noisy. But yeah, that was interesting.
That's amazing when stuff like that happens. Um, so with all the places that you've investigated, what would you say was your most favourite? You've had lots of activity and you've enjoyed the night and stuff like that. Where recommend?
In Hull, when you come into Hull, when you come in via the railway station, there's a big old Victorian hotel called the Royal Station Hotel.
Mhm.
And many years ago, when they were building the shopping development next to the station, the hotel was empty because no one would stay in it because they were pile driving at all hours. So I would ring up and speak to the duty
Mhm.
manager and say, "Can I come and have a look around with my equipment?" And it just so happened the duty manager was really big into the paranormal. And he was like, "Yeah, come down and we'll go around together." And we spent so many nights just walking around the hotel at night. We'd go and sit in different rooms. There's a big subterranean tunnel network underneath. We'd go down there. We'd go into the old kitchens and stuff.
Yeah.
Just ask out. And I remember on one occasion, it was weird because sometimes when you ask out, stuff happens and sometimes it doesn't. And I remember one particular night, it was flat. It was really dead. And I remember we went down into
Mm.
the main hall, the main reception area is really big and grand. And at one side there's a
Yeah.
bar, at the other side there's a cafe and a restaurant, there's a ballroom. And I remember we sat down in the middle, and there was myself and there was Ray, the duty manager. They had like a night watchman. They had a guy who makes like sandwiches and drinks for people on a night. They had the receptionist. There was about 5 or 6 of us, big burly fellas, just sat around having a cup of tea, shooting the
Yeah.
breeze, just talking about stuff. And as we were talking, a young boy came from the restaurant area, and he was dressed in blue with a hat on, and he had his hand in his pocket, sort of like that. And I said to Ray, "Is that one of
Yeah.
your staff members?" And Ray looked at me and he said, "No, he didn't work here." So we all assumed he'd broke in, and we all got up and ran after him. And he ran down a
Yeah.
corridor that ran next to the restaurant and went straight for a wall. And I remember all at once, all these big burly fellas just stopped. And for the rest of the night,
Yeah.
we just stayed together. No one would leave each other's side. Everywhere we went as a unit. I remember at one point going to the toilet and turning around, and there were 6 or 7 fellas all stood in there, like nobody wanted to be alone. It was weird. And it was
Yeah.
just a little boy. But yeah, that was a weird experience. Like I say, it's one of the most active places. I remember one night I took a staff member, again, big strapping lad. He worked on the reception. He wanted to go and see the basement area, and the basement is a really long tunnel with rooms leading off. And if you stand at one end, it's really bright, and the other end is really dark.
Yeah.
So psychologically, not heading to the darkness, it it's quite scary. So I'd say to people, don't look
Mm.
towards the darkness. If you get scared, look back towards the light. And I remember we got to the bottom where it was really dark, and he
Yeah.
was a bit worried about the darkness. And I said, look back down the tunnel towards the light. And I remember him looking back and screaming. And he was shaking, and he said, I need to go now. I need to get out of here now. And I said to him, what's the problem? And he said, and this was his words, I've just seen the Slender Man. And I just laughed at him. I just said, like, Slender Man's like a fictional character.
Wow.
And I took him back upstairs and said to him, describe what you've seen.
Yeah.
And he said he had a top hat on and a jacket, which to me is a Victorian gentleman. But in his mind, he'd seen the Slender Man. And I said, it sounds more like a Victorian gent.
Yeah.
And he said, I don't. He handed his keys in. He drank a double at the bar and he got a taxi and left and never came back. And it was just that, it was like, what he's not done anything scary to you. You've just seen him. Why panic? Why leave? But yeah, it's amazing the
Yeah.
different effects it has on.
Absolutely. I mean, I helped out a paranormal team quite a few years back now, and they had a weekend event on a barge, Thames barge. So because they didn't have any staff for the event, I offered up my team to go and help them. We stayed like from Thursday night straight through to Sunday. And when we got there, we set up the CCTV cameras. So we had it was a boat, so you only had like the living quarters and then the bedrooms at the other end. So we was filming the corridor and the main section of the boat. And we'd done a ghost walk around. I think it was. I can't think of the place now. Morden. That was it. Around Morden. It was a lot of. It was a small village, so you got loads of history there, smugglers and all that sort of stories going around. And while we was off doing this ghost walk, one of my team members was left back at the barge, and as she was putting down the last finishing touches to the event, getting things ready and stuff, she heard someone call her name. So she turned around and there was no one there. So she thought nothing of it and she carried on. And then she coming, but again, there was no one in there. And okay, maybe there was a wave and it not. But we actually went back over the CCTV footage when we remembered it at least, and we actually caught what looked like an apparition of a boy walking across the fireplace and then down towards the bedrooms. He disappeared. That was weird. I had the cameras go all weekend, and the only point that camera pixelated to give you that image was at that particular time. The rest of the time, it was absolutely clear.
Yeah.
So we don't know whether we actually caught something or whether there was a fault with the cameras. There's so many possibilities.
Oh yeah.
But that was a long time ago when we really what was going on. But yeah, research and investigate always the way. That yeah, I don't always jump to the conclusions of ghosts. That's like the last resort.
Yeah, well, it's like I said to people, natural before supernatural and normal before paranormal. The amount of times it's been a window pane or a door vibrating in the wind or a dripping pipe and stuff like that. And 9 out of 10 times it is just normal and natural and you can explain it, but then occasionally you do get that weird stuff where it just blows everyone's mind and you can't explain it.
Absolutely. I mean, there's been things going on, and I don't know, like as you said, the door shaking or something, or moving. I always say that when someone jumps to the conclusion, "Oh, that's weird," I'd be like, "Well, yeah, okay. There's two options we can go with. It's either the wind moving the door, or there's a ghost standing there shaking the door. More likely, let's go with the wind."
Yeah.
My
favorite is when
I always see that.
I love it when they ask for stuff, and is anyone here? Can you bang? And there's a big bang, and they start screaming and running around.
Yeah.
And I'll say to them, like, this is what you've just asked for.
Yeah.
Like, you imagine being dead for 250 years. The first person that comes in and asks for you to do something, and you do it, and they run off screaming. Like, let's stay and see what we get, and don't panic and don't worry. I remember one lady, we was at an event, and she was seated, and she jumped that high. She landed on a gentleman's lap in the darkness because she was so.
Yeah.
And she'd asked out for stuff, and she was, and I said to her, "You've asked for this. This is what you want. This is why you're coming to experience this, and now it's happening. You're reacting like this. You need to calm down a little bit."
Yeah, you did tend to see that sort of stuff on Most Haunted in the early years, especially with a vet. She'd be screaming and running all over the place, and it's like, well, hang on a minute, you just asked for that to happen. So at least stay there.
Yeah,
but that was part and parcel of the draw to it, really. And
I've seen events and stuff, I remember at one event, this guy was asking, if there's anyone here, give us a sign, and there was two big bangs, and he asked out again, if there's anyone here, give us a sign, and we got two big bangs, and it was later revealed that he'd been caught on camera actually creating the bangs himself. He was knocking his feet against a wooden door.
Yeah.
And it was like, what's the point of that? Because you're not only ripping yourself off, but you're ripping all these other people off as well. And I remember him being ejected and sort of saying, come on, don't do stuff like that. These people are expecting something to happen,
Yeah, I think they just think it's funny, and they just do it for a laugh, not thinking about the bigger picture. That is quite a sad thing when that does happen. Definitely. Yeah. No, I used to do events all the time, but I've stopped doing them now because of the public doing things like that. But I just think media and the paranormal's just ruining it for people. So I've sort of stepped back now, and I just do like this video podcast thing. But I do go out occasionally with a few friends that I've had over the years. That we go out investigating and stuff, and it's just a group of friends. We'll book a location and just keep it between like 6, 7 of us, and we just go out and enjoy it now.
Yeah.
And
people
I think
you
that's
trust,
the way forward for me.
Definitely,
Absolutely
more enjoyable, smaller group, and you know each other, and you can go and have fun and learn along the way, and all part of the experience.
Yeah, I mean, I always like to have that personal experience rather than getting out all the kit, all the gadgets and stuff. I tended to just have a bit of like pen and paper, a note, a voice recorder, and it really. I just go and sit in a corner somewhere and have my own experiences, and that's really where I went with it.
Keep it
but
simple.
it's all good fun, definitely. Yeah, that's it. Back to basics, as it were. Yeah. So, if anyone's interested in getting any of your books, where can they get them from?
Usually on Amazon, but they're all off sale at the moment because I'm just moving from one publisher to a new publisher. So hopefully they'll be back up again soon. I was hoping they was going to be up before Christmas, but it looks unlikely. But they do show up now and again on Amazon and eBay. So there's copies out there circulating.
Oh, excellent. Cool. Well, yeah, I'll be able to get some of those, especially the Jack the Ripper one. That's something that interests me.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So, what projects have you got coming up next?
So I mean, this week is my busiest week, as we mentioned earlier on before we started recording. I'm just snowed under at the minute with work. It's fantastic. I've got a private lecture tomorrow evening. On Thursday night, I'm doing a paranormal investigation. I usually do one public paranormal investigation a year, and that's on Thursday.
Yeah.
On Friday, I'm doing a steampunk ghost walk. So that'll be fun. On the Saturday, I'm appearing at the Hull Horror Festival during the day, and then during the evening, I'm appearing at Paragon Arcade in Hull, where people can come and listen to ghost stories while they get tattoos and stuff like that. Sunday, I've got another ghost walk, and then on Monday, Halloween itself, I'm working in the gin school in Hull, where people can basically drink gin while they listen to ghost stories. So that's on Halloween. So, and then for the rest of the week, I've got a couple of private tours booked in. So very busy at the minute. So yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah, I'm for Halloween. I'm going away. We've got a cottage that's haunted, so we're going to go and investigate that for the whole week. That's it. Before and after. So it's going to be a nice week away.
Brilliant.
Yeah, busman's holiday, as it were. Yeah, no. Looking forward to that one. Um, so these events that you're going to over the Halloween and stuff, is there like tickets available? Can people go out and buy them, and
They're
or
all
is it
fully
just a
booked.
case of come along?
Yeah, they're all fully booked.
Really? Oh, okay, excellent.
Yeah, I've had
Oh,
a,
even better.
I've had a rush on tickets and stuff, so everything is fully booked now until November. So it's been crazy. So starting sort of tomorrow night, that's it.
Doesn't it just?
I'm not work until November.
Yeah.
So
Did you do much investigating or anything through COVID? Did you do like use that
well,
time for research and?
yeah, it was mainly research. During COVID, a lot of the archives opened up for free online. So I spent a lot of time going through old
Okay.
newspapers. I spent a lot of time going through the archives. The National Archives made the UFO documents free to download. So I basically got
Yeah.
I got a USB stick off Amazon, downloaded them all, saved them to the stick, and then just spent most of my time reading through them. So that was lovely. So
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time writing and things, typing up newspaper reports and all sorts. So it was nice. And through lockdown as well, there was a lot of people wanting to do quizzes. So I was quiz master for a number of quizzes online and stuff. So that kept me busy. And then I was also doing a fair bit of stuff like this, but also people wanted to obviously the children's education. I did a lot of stuff for history and things online for children. I did a virtual treasure hunt that children could do using Google Street View and things like that. So I kept quite busy throughout lockdown. It was really, really good. And I've got kids as well, so they were all being homeschooled. So we had a very rigorous timetable where the kids were learning. So it would be literally like we're all learning up until sort of dinner time, and then after dinner time we can have sort of our own free time to go and do, whatever we want to do. And it was great. It was nice. It was well structured. The kids enjoyed it. And,
if only on.
If only.
Yeah. That you was doing the old quiz, because we did the same sort of thing. But we had like a quiz amongst quite a few paranormal people that I know. So yeah, we could have had you as a quiz master.
Yeah, it was great fun. And then after lockdown, a lot of the people that were in the quiz, we all got to meet up. So that was nice because you've sat for a year talking to the people in a virtual world, and now you can go to pub together. And it was wonderful to go out and meet them all. And one of the ladies said, she said, it's the first time I've met you, but it's like I've known you for years. And it was really nice just to go out with them all and take them on a little bit of a tour and then go to pub afterwards. Yeah, it was nice.
Yeah, that must have been. I think that's one of the good things about the whole lockdown situation we had. It's like coming back out, and we just had that whole new appreciation for everybody.
Yeah,
it's almost like everything was taken for granted before, and now we just appreciate life a little bit more, which is good.
Definitely, yeah. I think for me it was a lot of the archives and stuff like that were closed and were restricted, and there was no for archive places you can't really put one-way systems in, so a lot of them remained closed. So when they reopened again, I was like a kid in a candy shop. I remember getting on the train and going to Scarborough and spending the day in the archives in Scarborough, and then going to York, spending the day in the archives in York, just getting as much done as possible, just in case it happened again. I was worried that we were going to go into so, and I remember at one point we went wild camping on the North Yorkshire moors and we did some sky watching. It was wonderful. Just nice to be back outdoors again in a different view. So that was really nice.
Absolutely. No, that's good. Okay, so we're coming up to the end of the show. Got about 4 minutes left. If anyone wants to contact you about any paranormal stuff, can they do that on social media? Have you got a
Yeah,
website or anything?
just look for Mike Covell on Facebook, Mike Covell on Twitter, or Amazing Old Tours, which is on Facebook. I have Instagram and stuff, but I can never remember who I am on them. Lots of things. I'm just getting used to it all. So, but yeah, they can find me through them places.
Yeah. Absolutely, I'm exactly the same. I've got Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, now, and it's like I don't know. I don't know what I am on it. So I feel your pain. So sold out for your other tours coming up to Halloween. Have you got any other future ones that people can still book on?
Yeah, coming up November, we're doing tours in Hull and we're doing tours in Beverley, which is a local town to Hull. And again, these are all sort of dark history, ghost walk type things. So really popular at the minute. But we do other stuff: World War One, World War Two, true crime tours, you name it. And they've got a lot of private bookings coming up as well. It's the time of the year where people want to do sort of team building exercises and staff nights out and that kind of thing. So I get quite popular with groups to do stuff before Christmas. So it just gets a bit colder.
Yeah, it's just they can't do that in the summer.
No.
They should move Halloween to the summer.
Yeah. Well, apparently we're going to have a nice warm Halloween this year. So
yeah, might not have to go on. Yeah, it's supposed to be quite warm, isn't it? The weather.
Yeah.
Coming in from Siberia. Yeah, that's it. Absolutely. Well, unfortunately, we come to the end of the show, so I want to thank you, Mike, for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure. Definitely have to have you on again. Maybe when you're not so busy and you can tell us all about your Halloween. That'd be good. But yeah, so thank you very so much for joining me, especially on your night off. And I want to thank everyone that's been in the chat room. Again, fantastic having you all there. So the only thing that remains for me to do is say good night. So it's a good night for Mike and it's a good night for me. Bye, everybody.